Hello, I'd like to read to you one of my favourite books from when I was growing up, and it's Mr. Benn, and it is published by David McKee. He was the author. Published by Hodder Children's Books, and Hodder are the illustrators. Oh, sorry, the King Rollo films are the illustrators as well. Okay, I'd like to read you a story called Red Night. It was a festive morning Saturday morning in Festive Road. Men were unloading their vans, boys were playing with wooden swords. Everything was ordinary. At number 52, the postman arrived with a letter for Mr. Benn. It was an invitation to a fancy dress party. Mr. Benn wasn't very fond of parties, but he did like fancy dress, so off he went in search of something special to wear. He tried the big shops, but he didn't find anything. He tried the not-so-big shops. He tried the small shops, but he couldn't find fancy dress anywhere, only ordinary, everyday clothes. At last, in a back lane, he found a little shop with all sorts of interesting things to wear. In the window was a suit of bright red armour. Just a ticket, thought Mr. Benn, so in he went. As if by magic, the shopkeeper appeared. "Can I help you, sir?" he asked. "I wonder if I might borrow that red suit of armour." "Of course," replied the shopkeeper. "Try it on," and he pointed to the changing room. Quickly Mr. Benn put on the armour. He laughed at the red night reflected in the mirror. Then he noticed another door. "Well, I never," he said, and walked through the second doorway. On the other side, Mr. Benn found himself in a rocky countryside. He looked around and spotted smoke rising from behind a large pile of rocks. He felt brave in his red armour, so he climbed up the rocks to see what was making the smoke. Down below, he saw a large dragon breathing out clouds of smoke. "It's somebody else in fancy dress," he thought. So he called down, "That's a good outfit. How do you make the smoke?" "You can't fool me," said the dragon. "You've been sent to kill me." Kill him, thought Mr. Benn. He really is a dragon, but a very sad dragon. Before long, Mr. Benn was sitting down beside the dragon, and the dragon told him his story. He used to live happily in a castle. He worked hard lighting all the fires, but one day a man came with a new idea for lighting fires. He had matches. Now, nobody wanted matches because they liked the dragon to light their fires. The matchmaker was cross about this, so he set fire to a barn or two and blamed the dragon. When the king's favourite horse, White Horse, ran away, the dragon was told it was his fault too. The poor dragon couldn't do anything right and was sent away from the castle in shame. Now everybody had to buy the matchmaker's matches. The dragon looked crestfallen and pointed to the horse. "I've been looking after him, but I'm much too afraid to return him." "I'll help you," said Mr. Benn. "Show me where the castle is and I'll tell the king the true story." The dragon was delighted, and they set off for the castle straight away. They walked and walked, but the nearer they got, the slower the dragon went. Then all of a sudden, when they saw the castle in the distance, the dragon stopped completely. "I'll just wait here under the trees till you return," he said. Seeing how nervous the dragon was, Mr. Benn said goodbye and rode off towards the castle on the fine white horse. When the guards saw Mr. Benn, they rushed to tell the king that the dragon must have been killed because a brave knight was riding up to the castle on his white horse. They took him straight to the king for his reward. The king listened while Mr. Benn told him the dragon's sad story. The king was so happy because he had missed the dragon and was delighted to hear the truth. Nobody liked the nasty matchmaker. He had been cheating the people by making his matches more and more expensive. "Bring the matchmaker here," said the king. The people booed and hissed as the miserable matchmaker was brought before him. "I order you to go to prison," he thundered, and the guards took him to the deepest, darkest dungeon while the king decided how to punish the rascal. "Now take me to the dragon," said the king. Mr. Benn led the king and his guards to welcome back the dragon. Just before they reached the dragon's hiding place, the procession stopped because they didn't want to frighten him. The king and Mr. Benn got off their horses and walked to the trees where the dragon was crouching. The king was happy to see the dragon again and told him how sorry he was for all his troubles. The dragon was so overjoyed that he made the king and Mr. Benn ride on his back. With the dragon leading the way in triumph and the guards following behind cheering, they made their way back to the castle. Everybody came to welcome the dragon. The king made a speech and explained how the matchmaker was a troublemaker, not the dragon. As punishment, the matchmaker would have to make as many matches as the people needed for nothing. From now on, the dragon would be the king's personal firelighter. Everybody cheered and clapped. Then the king thanked Mr. Benn and said that to celebrate there would be a magnificent feast and Mr. Benn would be the guest of honour. Preparation started and everybody set to make it the finest feast ever. While everyone was rushing to and fro with puddings and cakes, pies and terrines, Mr. Benn stood at the side and watched. Suddenly, a familiar little man appeared. "Would you like to change before the feast, sir?" he asked. "You find the other clothes in here." And he showed Mr. Benn through a door to the changing room of the shop. Mr. Benn took a last look at himself in the mirror. Slowly he took off the helmet, the gloves, and the fine suit of red armour, and put on his usual clothes. "I've had too much excitement for one day to go to the fancy dress party now," said Mr. Benn. "I won't take it after all." "Right you are, sir," smiled the little man. "Shall we be seeing you again?" "Oh, yes," said Mr. Benn. "I'll be back very soon." Mr. Benn walked home. As he put his hand into his pocket for his keys, he found a very unusual box of matches. He smiled at the picture on the box. "How nice," he thought. "I'll keep it just to remind me."